Have a seat, guys. Well, it is good to be back. Of course, we haven't taken any time off, but every week, it just blows me away. We see new faces every week, so we have some new people here tonight. Thank you so much for coming to the well. People ask me all the time, older people, I guess my age or whatever, ask me, how's it going? How's the service going? And I tell you, if I could write something that I would love to do, like a job description for myself, not that this is necessarily a job or whatever, but if I could write something that I just loved, this would be. I couldn't write it any better than this. I just love with you guys, and again, new faces here tonight. Of course, Josh is new every week because I call him by the wrong name every single week. He's been here every time, just except for twice, I think, maybe once, and I've called him Caleb I don't know why. He just looks like Caleb to me, so sorry, Josh. I'll get it. I'll get there. But we have new faces tonight, so thank you so much for being here. It kind of blows me away that you would come to the well. And we, like I said in the very first night, we want to be a place for you can begin and belong. And let me just, I know most of you have heard that, but what I mean by that is that maybe it's begin a relationship with Christ. But maybe you've already begun that. So it's to begin relationships, building relationships with other young adults your age in this community. There's a lot of young adults in this community. So much more so than there were a few years ago. So maybe that's what it is for you, just to begin those relationships, build those relationships with other believers, but then also a place for you to belong, because some of you have maybe just pretty recently gotten out of the youth group, right? And you don't know where to go. What's next? Because there's not always a next. I'm not slamming churches for not having. We didn't either at our church. We didn't have really a place for young adults at our church. And we have small groups, but it's not the same as youth groups. So we just wanted to have, this is not youth group time, but we just wanted to have a place where you could belong, you could come together on a weekly basis and worship. And one of the goals was that it wouldn't be at our church. Or at a church, and that has nothing to do with against our church or anybody's church. It's just I wanted to be in the community where everyone is, and it just we've kind of broken down a lot of barriers, I think, by doing that. So having it here at Cities has just worked out great. So that we're 5 weeks in, so it's just a great time. Well, we've come through Christmas. You survived Christmas, right? Everybody survived Christmas. It looks like. Maybe. You're still thinking about it. I don't know. Did everybody have a good Christmas? Good? Did you get to spend time with family that you don't normally see and that you're glad you don't normally see? You don't have to answer that. That's Thanksgiving, right? We do that at Thanksgiving, where we have spend time with people that we don't normally see, and we're good with that. Anyways, Christmas is a fun time, right? I mean, it's a great time of year. Get to do some things that we don't normally get to do. Both of my boys were home for a few days, so Luke is still here, but Stephen was home for a few days too, and so that was pretty cool. Everybody, all four of us, in the same under the same roof for a few nights. That's not happened very much lately, so that was kind of cool. But how many of you is Christmas? Maybe it's not yet, but it will be, trust me. It might be a little overwhelming. Has anybody felt like it's been a little overwhelming at times? Wait till you're older and you have kids of your own, and then you'll have all of these places you're supposed to go, right? Because you're supposed to go to grandparents and all these places. I think I said this last week. If you were here, I apologize. But when our boys were little, actually when our oldest son was little, it was before Luke was born, both of my parents were divorced, and my wife's parents, she's here, she's watching. Are you checking the scores of the games? Yeah, she's on the phone checking the scores. So her parents were divorced too. So if you've seen the movie Four Christmases, we lived that. I mean, we lived the Four Christmases, and we did that for 2 years. And I finally said, you know what? I'm done. We're not doing this. It was just overwhelming to us because my parents were up north. Because I'm a Yankee, and my in-laws were up in the mountains in Crossville. So I mean, we went all over the place, and there was nothing peaceful about it. It was overwhelming for us, And life gets that way, doesn't it? Life just gets overwhelming. How many of you are into New Year's resolutions? Anybody do that? Still, I don't really do resolutions. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do resolutions. I'm a goal-oriented person, so I write out some goals for myself that I want to achieve every year. But I thought this was interesting. I found these on the internet, so we know they have to be true, right? Because everything on the internet is true. But these were actual resolutions that people had made. So one was, I will start washing my hands every time after I use the restroom. That was a resolution. I hope that's nobody in the room, okay? I will stop drinking orange juice after I just brushed my teeth. Is that not the grossest thing ever? Nobody likes that, do they? Okay, good. That's terrible. Let's see. I will watch more movie remakes. I don't know what that's about. I will eat only white snow. I will spend less than $1,825 for coffee at Starbucks this year. Anybody can say amen to that? Has anybody been to the new Starbucks yet? I haven't gone there yet. Is it pretty cool? I haven't been yet. I haven't been there. So, let me see. Here's a couple more. I will stop talking on the phone while on the pot. Now, be honest. How many of you have done that? You're in the restroom and you're talking on the phone. If you're me, you have to, because Heather calls me every time I'm in the bathroom. Every time she calls me, I'm in the bathroom. So I don't know what that's about. But anyways, she has perfect timing. Let's see. I will. This status update for a New Year's resolution was: I will not eat medicine just because it looks like candy. I don't get that one. I will always replace the gas nozzle before driving away from the pump. Now, be honest with me. How many of you have driven away and the gas thing is still in the? Anybody done that? You've done that. That's all right. He wasn't going to be honest, so they were, his brothers bailing him out there. And then I will shower less and use more cologne. So hopefully that's not you. But maybe that's not your resolution. But sometimes a new year, things that are happening. You have new responsibilities. Maybe a new semester is starting if you're in college. If you're not in college, other things are happening at work maybe, or whatever stage of life you're in. You have things that happen from time to time that can cause you to feel a little overwhelmed, right? And so here's what I mean by overwhelmed. So we're going to spend the next few weeks in overwhelmed, but here's what overwhelmed means. Overwhelmed means you are overcome completely in mind or feeling. You just feel like you're under the weight of everything. Now, I don't know where you are right now, and I don't know what necessarily is going on in your life right now. We've had a little bit of a break because of the Christmas holidays. I get that, but still, there's anxiety knowing what's coming next, right? If you're in school, it's this next semester is about to start, and you're like, man, this one class, I don't really want to take this one class or any of these classes or whatever. I don't know, but I don't want to take any of these. Or you're looking for a job, and that can be overwhelming. So it's just there's seasons in life that are just overwhelming. You feel like you're completely under just all of the pressure. You're completely overwhelmed in mind or feeling. It also means to cover or bury beneath a mass of something. You feel like just everything is piled up on you at times. Now, whether that's real or perceived, it still feels that way, right? We still go through overwhelmed feelings. Now, I feel this is a topic that's pretty near and dear to me because I feel overwhelmed quite a bit. Now, most of it is perceived. It's not reality. Okay, it's not because I have too much on me. I just get overwhelmed pretty easily at times. So one of my favorite passages about feeling overwhelmed. We're not gonna preach from this. I'm not gonna preach. You're not gonna preach at all, hopefully. But I'm not gonna preach from this tonight. But this is a passage that kind of sets the tone for us. This is out of one of Paul's letters in the book of Philippians. And it's one of my favorite passages because most of my life I've dealt with some sort of anxiety or feeling overwhelmed about things, just life in general. Even when I didn't really have a good excuse to, I still kind of felt that way at times. So here's what he says, Paul writes in chapter 4, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness Some translations say gentleness. Let your gentleness or reasonableness be made known to everyone. So let everyone see that even no matter what you're going through, you have this gentle spirit about you. Let it be known to everyone, the Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything with prayer and supplication. That means supplication just means when you're asking of God, okay, you're pleading with God, you're asking him to do something. With thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, which means you may not understand where the peace comes from, but it comes from God, even though you may not understand it, because it's just God's ways are just not our ways. And we can have peace in situations where normally we would not have peace simply because of God's grace and God's power. So the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, when we get overwhelmed, sometimes if you're anything like me, when I get overwhelmed, I don't see clearly. Basically, all I see is the circumstance that I'm in. I don't necessarily see God working when I feel overwhelmed. Are you like that? At all? Like I can't see out of my current circumstance. Does that make sense? When I was in college one time, well, I was in college several years, but that's for a different story. But one year when I was in college, I had made a poor choice on a term paper, and man, I got caught. I plagiarized on a term paper, and I got caught. And I was called into, and listen, there were grounds for being expelled from school. I could have and maybe should have been expelled from college. And I was a nervous wreck because everything I'd worked for, I was playing baseball, I was away from home. I was the only one in my family that had gone to college or was, had been in college. And so I just felt so overwhelmed in that moment. And it was real, and it was brought on by me. It was my poor choice that brought that on. But I felt so overwhelmed, like the weight of the world was just pouring down on me, and I didn't know what to do. And so sometimes when we feel overwhelmed, we make poor choices just like that. I was behind in this class, and I wasn't really good at this class anyway, or in this study anyways. I wasn't really good in school, so I tried to take the easy way out, and it caused me to make a poor choice. The devil didn't make me do it. I did it all by myself. I think sometimes we blame our mistakes or we blame our failures on the enemy, and yes, he can cause us to make poor choices. He's always on the prowl. Peter says he's always on the prowl looking for someone to devour. But listen, I think sometimes we give him too much credit. I don't need Satan to make poor choices. I'm extremely capable because I've proven it time and time again of making my own poor choices of my own free will. And I did that time, because I felt overwhelmed. And when we do that, when we feel overwhelmed, sometimes we don't see what's going on in our lives because we can't see outside of the circumstances. You see, I can see your issues pretty easily. Not all of you, because I don't know all of you, but the ones I know, I can see your issues pretty easily, but I can't always see mine. Because sometimes we just can't see outside of who we are and what we are doing. When we're overwhelmed, we don't always see our own failures because we just don't see clearly and we make more mistakes. It's always easy to see other people's mistakes, isn't it? But sometimes it's not so easy to see our own. Have you ever been in a really bad storm? And they talk about if you're in the eye of the storm, it's calm in there. That's kind of like the overwhelmed feeling. When we're in the eye of the storm, we see all the debris around us, but we don't necessarily see what's going on inside of our lives too, and the difficult things or the poor choices we're making. So over the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to kind of walk slowly through the book of 1 Peter. 1 Peter knew a lot about feeling overwhelmed, Peter himself, not that there was a second Peter, but I mean the Peter who wrote these, he knew a lot about feeling overwhelmed because he failed. He failed the Lord in a very crucial time in his life. So he knew what it was like. Now, this book, or this letter, really, it's not really a book. It's a letter that Peter wrote. It's not, the theme of the book is not overwhelmed, or the theme of the book is not anxiety. In fact, the theme of the book is suffering of a Christ follower. If you're a Christ follower, you are going to suffer. That's the theme, really, overall theme of the letter of 1 Peter. That we will suffer for being a Christ follower. Now, so how do I connect that with being overwhelmed? I don't know about you, but when I suffer, and not that I've suffered any more than anybody else, but when I suffer, I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I'm under a lot of pressure. When I'm going through something that is just kind of eating my lunch, I can't see beyond that. When I suffer, I get overwhelmed. But we can have peace. Just like Paul wrote in Philippians, we can have peace. We may not understand where it comes from, but we can have peace. So when you feel overwhelmed, this is kind of just an introductory message for tonight out of 1 Peter chapter 1. As we go through this, we're going to look at some reasons why that cause us to feel overwhelmed, but why we don't have to feel overwhelmed, even when circumstances aren't so good. And you guys know, circumstances change, don't they? You go from good to maybe worse, bad, or maybe even get from bad to worse, back to good. It's just a cycle. Sometimes it's a vicious cycle. And sometimes you feel like you're in that cycle for a long time, right? And it just seems like, man, Lord, is it ever going to change for me? So Peter talks about how we can have peace even when the circumstances around us are overwhelming. So we're going to read chapter 1, 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 through 9. If you follow along with me, it'll be on the TV screen here too. He says, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials." Now let me stop there for a second. What does he mean by in this? In this you rejoice. What is this? It's whatever you're going through. Whatever suffering, remember the theme of the book of 1 Peter is the suffering of a Christ follower. You're suffering not because you did anything wrong, just because you have a relationship with Christ. So in this suffering, whatever the suffering is, whether it's persecution or whether it's just, I don't know what it is for me or for you. I know what it is for me at times, but I don't know what it is for you. But whatever it is, he's saying in this season that you are in right now, this suffering that you're going through, he says in this you can rejoice. That goes against everything that we've ever, that we know about, right? I mean, we don't rejoice in suffering. Or we don't. That's not something that just naturally comes to me, anyways. I don't know if it comes to you or not, but I don't think, oh Lord, thank you so much for this situation that is causing me great pain. That I don't think that way. That's kind of counterculture to how I think. So anyways, but he says we can rejoice. He says, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, which means this: your suffering are going to look different than mine, and mine are going to look different from yours, and yours are going to look different from each other. We have, just like James says, we all have various trials, right? We all go through many different trials. They come in all shapes and sizes. No two are the same. Now, there's going to be some similarities. One of the early sufferings that I went through was the divorce of my parents, like I said. Maybe you've been through that. So we have that in common a little bit. But the situations or the circumstances surrounding that were probably a little different. Okay? So he says, in this you rejoice, if so for a little while you've grieved by various trials. Verse 7, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, and that's key, more precious than gold that perishes though it has been tested by fire, may be found as a result in praise and glory and honor in the revelation of Jesus Christ. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. So, real quickly, just a few things, just some observations on what Peter talked about or what he wrote about, what we can have some comfort knowing that even though the situation may cause us to feel overwhelmed, we can take comfort in the fact in this. Number one, that the situation or the thing that has caused you to feel overwhelmed is temporary. Now, I get it. That doesn't sound like much, right? That you may say, well, Deron, you don't know what I'm going through. And it's not been very temporary. It's been like several years. I understand that. I get that. I talked about college a little bit. College was never easy for me. I was on a little bit of a scholarship, but it was never enough to pay for my schooling. I told you my parents were divorced, and basically I was running away from home because it was just difficult in my home at that time. So I was running away from home. I had an opportunity to come to Tennessee to play, not to the University of Tennessee, but I went to Cumberland and played baseball, but it was never easy. Every semester I thought, okay, this is the semester they're going to kick me out because I don't have the money. Every semester I fretted over that. Every semester I felt this overwhelming, I felt defeated. But you know what? Somehow, some way, God provided. I look back on those days and when I was in school and I couldn't have a job because I was playing a sport. My mom couldn't send me money, and my dad he never sent me money either. And so I don't know how, honestly, and I'm not saying, oh, poor, pitiful me, and you feel sorry for me, because God blessed, and somehow, some way, I survived. I won't tell you how many years that was, but no, it was 5 years. I took 5 years in college, but I survived that. I don't really know how, other than it was just the grace of God, and God provided when I needed him to. And looking back, I think, man, it just doesn't add up. There's no way that I should have been able to do some of the things or get through college, because number one, I wasn't a very good student. And number two, I wasn't a great baseball player. But God provided. And it felt overwhelming all the time. And I know that you may be going through something right now, and you may feel like, you know what, Deron, you don't know, this is not temporary. I get that. But what I mean by temporary is, in the light of eternity, it's temporary. In the light of what God is going to do in the future in your life, it's really temporary. When you think about it, when you compare it to eternity, it's not going to last forever. He says that this will end. Listen, in verse 6. In this you rejoice, even for now, for a little while. If necessary, you have to suffer. For just a little while. I know your little while may have been going on for a few years now. I get that, okay? I really do. I get that. It doesn't seem very temporary, does it? It doesn't seem like it's just been going on for a little while. Sometimes it seems like it's never going to end. But when you look at it in relation to eternity, it's really just a temporary thing. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, for this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Just think about that. Maybe what you're going through right now, or maybe what you have been through, or maybe what you're about to go through. And I'm not a prophet. I'm not saying that I know what you're about to go through. I'm just saying you've either been through something, you're going through something, or you will go through something. No one is immune to difficulty. No one gets a pass on that, okay? We all have to face it. We all have faced it, and we all will face it again. But according to Paul, he's saying maybe this is preparing you for something. This, whatever you're going through, in this, you can rejoice, not because your situation is good, but because God is preparing you for something great. And I don't know what that is, but God does. And your responsibility and my responsibility to that is just to be faithful and trust God. It doesn't make it easier. I get that. Okay? It doesn't make it easier to go through it. It doesn't make it easy to say, okay, well, that's fine. I'll just live through it. I get it. It doesn't make it easier. But it does give a purpose to it. it gives a purpose to the pain that we may be struggling with. We don't have to feel overwhelmed because God has a plan. He's preparing you. Think about this. It's essential for your walk. Whatever you go through in life, I believe God has planned and he has a plan for it. And there's a purpose for it. And I wish it could be different. And sometimes I do. I wish it could be different. I said this morning, I preached this morning, and I said, sometimes we go through difficulty because God is trying to teach us something, and not like an evil teacher I'm teaching you a lesson. He's just trying to teach us a side of him that we would never see. I love mountaintop experience. I've told you that before. I love being on a mountaintop, but you know what? You got to climb through the valley to get up to the mountaintop, right? And if there's never a valley type of moments, if we're always on the mountaintop, then what would we need God for? Because everything's smooth sailing. So when we're in the valleys, that's where we really learn the depth and the love and the grace and the mercy of God. Now, it doesn't make it any easier. I don't like it anymore. I'm just saying sometimes it's essential that we go through difficulty because it prepares us for things that are coming. I remember when Lou Ray and I were first-time parents. Stephen was an infant. And this was back, I don't know what it is now, but like back then, insurance company, they sent us out 23 hours later. We hadn't even been in the hospital a whole day, and they sent us home with this thing, that I didn't even know what to do with. I didn't even know how to change diapers, and they're sending us home, and I'm a nervous wreck, right? And so I wasn't prepared for being an adult. I wasn't prepared for being a parent. So those things that we go through, they prepare us for what's to come. And now all of that, being a parent, prepared us for adulthood. It prepared us to be adults and to be the grown-up. Somebody got to be the grown-up, right? So it prepared us for that. So whatever you're going through, just count it as joy because it's temporary and it's essential to your walk. It doesn't make it easier, but it is essential. Secondly, your overwhelming circumstances strengthens your faith. It can strengthen your faith. I kind of alluded to that already, but look what he says in verse 7. He said, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, your faith, my faith, it has to be tested. We have to be tested in order for it to grow. If our faith is never tested, we will stay right where we are and we will never grow in our relationship with the Lord. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know if that's necessarily always biblical. I don't know. But I'm just saying my opinion, my experience is if our faith is never tested, if we never have difficult things that happen in our life, then our relationship with Christ, our faith will never be strengthened. Our faith will never grow. Because it won't have to. We go, if you like to, any of you like to work out or go run or go to the gym or anything, you know what? Some of you are shaking your head like, no way, not me. That's on your New Year's resolution, right? To go to the gym. I don't know. But, when you go to the gym, or if you work out or whatever you do, what you're basically, you're tearing down, when you lift weights, you're tearing down those muscles, basically. And if you're just getting started at that, it's really sore and it's painful and you don't want to go back because it's painful. But as you do it more and more, you're tearing those muscles down so that they will be built up. You see, our faith is kind of the same way. Sometimes our faith has to be tested so that it'll be stronger. Now again, I wish it could be a little different, but that's just how God works. God works in mysterious ways, and he knows what we need. And sometimes what we need is not what we want, right? You know that. You've lived long enough to know that. What I want is most often time, it's not what I need, it's what I want. And there's a big difference between wants and needs. There's just some things we have to go through. Look at James chapter 1, verse 4. Let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. God I've never been comfortable saying that God causes bad things to happen in our lives. Now, God is sovereign, okay? I've never been comfortable saying that, but I do believe with all of my heart that God allows us to go through certain things in our lives that will strengthen our faith, because he knows that we are lacking in some certain areas of our lives. And so he allows us to go through things that will cause our faith to be strengthened. There's a passage in Romans chapter 3, chapter 5, verses 3 through 5. I'll get there in just a second. Here's what he says. Paul again says, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. If you go through suffering, it's going to produce something, and it's going to produce endurance in your life. What does that mean? It means you're going to be able to just endure. You're going to be able to continue on, and you get stronger and stronger. And endurance produces character. It helps build your character up, helps make you a better person, a stronger person of character. And character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. You see, there's a reason for everything that we go through, whether we like it or not. There's a reason. If you don't go through difficulty, you'll never fully learn what it is to trust God. You won't, because you won't need to. If we never go through difficulty, why do we need God? If everything is always smooth sailing, then why would we need any help from anyone? I take young adults and students to Wales about every other year. In fact, we're going this year. If you'd be interested in going, you can talk to me later about that. We're going in, Jan's ready. We're going in June, June or July. I can't remember the dates, but we would love to take you if you want to go. But here's the deal. In Wales, it's not a third world country. So you think, well, why would you go to Wales? Because they have everything they need, and it's, they have running water, and, it's just kind of, it's pretty modern. It's just like here. And it's probably, and I've been in third world countries as well, but Wales is probably in some ways, the most difficult place to go and share your faith. And there's no language barrier other than those of you that have a really southern accent, they would, and the Welsh, the British accent that they have, but there's no language barrier. They speak English. So why would it be difficult? Because they have everything that they need. They don't need God. That's their mindset. That is their mindset. Now, I'm not blasting on them, because I don't know that we're too far from that. I think we kind of have that same mindset in America. But it's difficult. I have a friend, Kevin, who's lived over there for 9 years, 8 or 9 years, something like that. And it has been so frustrating for him at times. He knows that God has called him there, and they are there. I mean, they're purchasing a house. They're planting their roots. They have 3 little girls, beautiful family, just a great friend. But it's been very frustrating for him, because he just can't seem to reach a lot of people. And he has friends in Africa, and they're reaching people by the dozens and hundreds, and they're coming. But in Wales, it's just a little different, because those people have everything that they need. They don't see the need for God. If we have everything we need, if we never go through difficulty, then we won't necessarily see the need for God in our lives. So circumstances, I get it, can be difficult. And they can even be a little overwhelming, but know this, they're there for a purpose. They're there for a reason. They're temporary, but they are also there for a reason. Overwhelming circumstances will strengthen your faith if you allow them to. And then the last thing, and we're done. Overwhelming circumstances, the way we face them can glorify Jesus. Look what he says in verse 7. It may be found to result in praise and glory and honor and revelation of Jesus Christ. The way we face circumstances in life can be a huge impact on our witness to others. If you're going through something difficult, it can be such a huge impact, positive or negative. I had the opportunity to, this past summer, go and help and officiate a funeral. And I know that sounds morbid to say that I had an opportunity to do that, and it was a a precious thing. But the lady that passed away, her name was Mary Eubanks. And Mary was in her 90s, upper 90s probably. And she was a part of my youth ministry staff at my last church in her 70s. I mean, she was an amazing lady. And lost her husband probably 50, 60 years ago. She'd been a widow for a long, long time. Probably didn't have 2 quarters to rub together. She had no material at all. I mean, she was not materialistic. She didn't have any money. But I don't know that I've ever met a more genuine, joyful person. She was just filled with joy. Every week, she would go to this little, it wasn't really little, but it was a kind of a rural school, and she did FCA until she just physically could no longer do it anymore. And that was just within the last 7 or 8 years, probably. She did it on her own dime. She took them breakfast every week, the one day a week that she went. She loved Jesus, and she didn't have great circumstances. If you would see where she lived, the house that she lived in, it was as humble as any that you've ever seen. I promise you that. But you would never know it to talk to Miss Mary. It was such an honor for me when she had asked, or her family had asked, that I come and just share a few words at her celebration of life service, because she had such an impact on me. And it wasn't necessarily because she was always encouraging me with positive words. Sometimes she stepped on my toes because I wasn't sharing my faith enough, and she let me know it. But that was just her. You would never know that she didn't have anything at home. She was just joyful. Her circumstances were almost never good, but you never would know it. Not by talking to her, not by hearing how she loved the Lord. She loved her Jesus like very few people I've ever met in my entire life. There was a lady that I met in Romania years ago. That's where Jan's from. And her name was Lunitsa. She didn't speak any English. She lived in a little village that you couldn't get to unless the roads were dry. And thankfully, the day that we were there, the roads were dry. And there was about 10 to 12 homes, for lack of a better term, in this little village. And the missionary that we were there with, every other week, he would go to Lunitsa's house, and they would have church service there in her house. She had a mud house, basically built just out of mud, and all of the village would come down to her house, and they would have church service in one of her rooms. Here's the thing that was so amazing to me was, as I don't know how long she'd been a widow. I'm sure she is no longer alive. I don't know that, but she had like a 3-room house, not bedroom, a 3-room house, a kitchen, living room, and then there's this, and maybe her bedroom was back off the kitchen, but then there was this little room off to the side that the door was shut. That's all she had. That's it. And she never went into that room with the door shut until it was time to worship. She never used that room. For 2 weeks, nobody ever went in that room until it was time for church. And she had this little radio. Back in the day, we would call it a boom box. But she had this little radio on the kitchen. She had electricity, believe it or not. She had this little radio. She didn't know how to work the radio. But so the missionary had it set to a Christian radio station. And so all she knew how to do was just plug it in and unplug it. And she'd plug it in and it'd be set for the radio station. So that's all she knew how to do. And I sat there in that room, and we had church service with her and a few people from the village. And I had no idea what was going on because it was all in Romanian. I didn't speak any of the language at all. I didn't know what was going on. But that lady, Lunitsa, loved Jesus more than anyone I'd ever met. And she had nothing. I mean, nothing. Her circumstances were beyond anything that I could imagine having to go through. But it never affected her love for her Lord. And you would never know it by talking to her how much she loved, how bad her circumstances was because she loved Jesus. It glorifies Jesus the way we face. He says in Philippians 1, chapter 1, verse 29, for it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake. We proclaim him best how we handle difficulty. We proclaim the love of God best how we handle difficult situations in our lives. When we feel overwhelmed, the way we handle those situations, they proclaims Christ better than anything else that we can do. One last passage I want to read to you is out of 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I promise. I think the last time I said it was the last one. This is the last one, I promise. Chapter 12, verse 9 and 10. Here's what Paul says. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Are you content with your current situation? Now, listen, I'm not talking about, he says, I'm not talking about being content with where you are in life. I think we all need to strive to, to grow and to become all that God has saved us to be. I'm not saying that we become complacent or become lazy. I'm not saying that at all. But not are we content with, but are we content in our circumstances? See, there's a difference. There's a difference. With implies that you're comfortable and you're complacent. And complacency to means it's just laziness. But if you're content in your circumstances, it means that no matter what happens, I'm going to trust God. No matter what everything looks like, I'm in this circumstance for a reason. I may not understand it right now, but I'm in this circumstance for a reason. I'm going to trust that God has a plan. And he has a purpose. And listen, I get it. I don't know what your circumstance is, and I don't pretend to know that. And it may be difficult, and I'm aware of that. But you can be content in any circumstance because God has a plan and a purpose.